Atlantis was real, and the reason you've never been allowed to know that is the most terrifying part of the story. Something was erased, not slowly, not through the gradual decay of empires, but in a single catastrophic moment that humanity was never supposed to remember. 11,600 years ago, give or take a century, the Earth shifted. Coastlines collapsed, oceans surged inland. Entire land masses vanished beneath the water in less than a single human lifetime. And somewhere at the center of that disappearing world was a civilization so far beyond anything we are taught to consider possible that history, your version of history, decided the safest option was to call it a myth. Plato was the one who said it out loud. In 360 BCE, this philosopher, who had access to the mystery schools of Egypt, who sat with the priests of Say and listened to things they did not write down publicly, described Atlantis not as a fairy tale, but as a living memory. He called it older than Athens by 9,000 years. He described concentric rings of water and land, a citadel at the center, a civilization that had developed navigational and architectural capabilities that should not have existed when they existed, and then he said they destroyed themselves. That last part matters, because the narrative we inherited strips away the why. It reduces the story to island, earthquake, gone. But Plato never said that. What he actually said was that the Atlanteans became corrupted, that they had received something, a divine inheritance, a technology of consciousness, and had turned it toward domination rather than resonance. And so the correction came, not as punishment in the way religion frames punishment, as consequence. Here is what no mainstream academic has ever satisfactorily explained. Why, across every major ancient civilization, Egyptian, Sumerian, Vedic, Mayan, Olmec, do we find the same obsessive relationships between architecture and frequency, between sacred sites and sound, between geometry and energy transmission? Why does the Great Pyramid of Giza emit measurable electromagnetic frequencies from its apex? Why are the world's most ancient megalithic sites, Göbekli Tepe, Pumapunku, Sacsayhuaman, aligned to the same star systems with a precision that modern engineers cannot replicate using modern tools? This is not coincidence. This is curriculum. And this is the part that gets deliberately buried. Atlantis was not a civilization that built with stone for aesthetics. Atlantis was a civilization that understood something we have collectively forgotten: that matter is not solid, that what you perceive as physical reality is a standing wave, a vibrational pattern locked into apparent form by resonant frequency. They did not haul blocks of granite across desert plains, they sang them into position. Sound, specifically harmonic frequency, was their primary technology. Sacred geometry was their operating system. The ley lines that run beneath our feet, connecting sites from Stonehenge to Giza to Angkor Wat in mathematically precise alignments, are not mythological. They are infrastructure. The remains of a planetary resonance grid that once functioned as a global consciousness network and was used to elevate human awareness at scale. But that is not what made this extraordinary. What made it extraordinary was that it worked. Not metaphorically, physiologically. When a human nervous system is immersed in the correct harmonic frequency, the 432 Hz tuning that was quietly abandoned when the world standardized to 440 Hz in 1939, the body enters a coherent state. Brainwaves synchronize, cellular repair accelerates. The membrane between ordinary awareness and expanded consciousness becomes permeable. This was not spirituality in the modern commodified sense. This was engineering. And Atlantis was the civilization that had mastered it completely. Then came the Cataclysm. Geologists now call it the Younger Dryas impact event. Around 10,800 BCE, a fragmented comet struck the North American ice sheet. The resulting meltwater pulse caused global sea levels to rise by over 120 meters within a matter of centuries. Coastlines that had been inhabited for thousands of years vanished without trace. Agricultural plains became ocean floors. The world that humanity had been built inside, the world that carried the living memory of what we were, sank beneath 600 feet of ocean. But something survived. A small number of initiated survivors, the ones the ancient texts name as the Shining Ones, the Eri Andu, the Apkallu, dispersed across the surviving continents. They arrived in Egypt, in Sumer, in the Yucatan, in the Indus Valley, and they did what survivors of civilization always do. They rebuilt from memory. They encoded the knowledge they carried into architecture, into mythological narrative, into geometry. The pyramids are not burial chambers. They are compression drives. Libraries of a physics so advanced it required symbolic language to survive centuries of cultural collapse. And then someone decided we should not access them. This is where history becomes deliberately uncomfortable. Because the erasure of Atlantis is not ancient, it is ongoing. Academic institutions systematically defund researchers who challenge the orthodox timeline. The Smithsonian Institution has a documented history of removing artifacts, physically withdrawing them from public access, that contradict the narrative of linear human development. Robert Schoch's geological analysis of the Great Sphinx, which demonstrated water erosion patterns consistent with a civilization existing 7,000 to 10,000 years before the accepted Egyptian date, was not refuted scientifically. It was socially discredited. The data exists, the geological evidence exists. The suppression is not passive, it is policy. Because what Atlantis represents, if even a fraction of what Plato and the ancient mystery priests described is accurate, is the single most dangerous idea available to a controlled population. It means humanity did not begin as primitives scratching symbols into cave walls. It means we were seeded with capability, with consciousness technology, with a direct and functional relationship to the frequencies that govern physical reality itself. And it means that relationship was severed, deliberately, replaced with a history that begins in scarcity and confusion, a spiritual architecture that positions the divine as external and unreachable, and an education system trained to dismiss any of this as mythology before you are old enough to evaluate the evidence for yourself. The frequency suppression is not metaphorical either. 440 Hz is neurologically anxious. It drives the nervous system into low-grade chronic stress, keeping the body in a state of mild but continuous threat response. The modern food supply systematically depletes magnesium, the mineral most critical for neurological coherence and deep brainwave regulation. The electromagnetic environment of the 21st century operates at frequencies that suppress delta brainwave states, which are the specific states in which direct, expanded experience becomes biologically accessible. None of this is accidental, and Atlantis is the key, not because it tells us what was lost, but because it proves the loss was architected. What if the reason we cannot locate Atlantis on any map is because we are searching for a place, when what was lost was a state of being, a frequency of coherence, a relationship with sound and matter and geometry that exists as dormant potential inside every human nervous system alive today, waiting to be recalibrated by the right conditions? What if the entire architecture of modern civilization, its official history, its standardized frequencies, its architectural ugliness, its media loops, serves one function above all others, to keep you vibrating too low to remember what you actually are? If the knowledge encoded into the ancient world is not mythology but suppressed physics, if the pyramid is a resonance chamber and the ley line is a transmission corridor and every sacred site is a frequency anchor left by survivors of a world we were not meant to know existed,